Hey everybody, Phil here. Today I want to talk about pre-flop adjustments. In past adjustment videos, I've talked about a single post-flop leak and gone into how to take advantage of that on multiple streets. With pre-flop, some of the adjustments are super simple. So I kind of wanted to batch them all together. We're not going to cover, every possible pre-flop leak and how to adjust to it, but we'll just talk about pre-flop in general and how to make adjustments. Let's start with a super obvious one. Let's say it's folded to you in the small blind, and you're up against a big blind who folds too much against a raise. That's an easy one. You just start raising everything. If they're folding enough to make raising with any two cards profitable, you raise with any two cards. Take yourself back, one position to the button, and now let's say the big blind folds too much, but the small blind doesn't. Now the actual math on, basically like how much they fold and where the cutoff becomes then for you to add additional hands to your opening range is not, that's for you to figure out. But you definitely can add some hands if the big blind folds too much. And even if the small blind folds too much, you can add a couple more hands, although most of the defense comes from the big blind. So focus on the big blind's kind of leaks or tendencies. You can also open more hands if the big blind and the small blind don't 3-bet enough. This is a common one that you'll see in live poker. They're just not finding the 3-bet bluffs. And so their 3-bet percentage, instead of being 10% in that spot, or actually small blinds could be as high as 20, I don't know. But let's say instead of being 12%, which is supposed to be, it's like 4% or 5%, you get to open more hands because of that. If they play poorly post-flop, you get to play more hands because you're going to get unexpected, like EV that the pre-flop charts don't take into account post-flop because they're going to make mistakes. Now, if let's take the opposite case. Let's say the blinds are too loose. You might say, oh, well, they're too loose, so I should be able to take advantage. Like some of my hands should do better because they're playing, too wide of a range. No, some of the EV from your weakest opens, in theory, come from stealing the blinds. Like a lot of it comes from stealing the blinds and getting some hands that dominate you to fold. Like when you're raising whatever it is, 7-5 suited, you're making a lot of 7-8 offsuits fold, things like that. If they're playing too loose, you have to open tighter and you're going to get more value with your good hands. A lot of people think, oh, well, if somebody's making a mistake, the way I take advantage is, if they're making a mistake, I must be able to play more hands to take advantage of that mistake. But sometimes the mistake, the way you take advantage is you play fewer hands because those hands lose value. The value all goes to to your better hands that you're going to keep opening. That's where their mistake benefits you. Similarly, if they're 3-betting too often, you can't open as many hands because you get denied equity. Like a lot of the hands that have to fold to the 3-bet get denied equity more often, lose some of that EV post flop. And then it's pretty important I think this is the one people struggle with the most, is when you face a tight opener, so somebody's raised with a range that's too tight, you have to fold some hands that are calls in theory. Now, the types of hands you want to fold, obviously, it depends on stack size and positions and a whole bunch of other things. But generally, against a tighter range, implied odds hands like 5-5 or 7-8 suited go up in value, whereas high card hands like king queen offsuit, ace jack offsuit, ace queen offsuit go down in value because those are dominated more often and are less frequently going to flop a huge hand that stacks their overpair, for example. There are a lot more obvious ones as we continue. So if they're folding to 3-bets too much, you have to 3-bet bluff more. And you probably still want to 3-bet your value hands, but that can become more complicated if it's, all right, so somebody opens an early position and they just always fold to the 3-bet unless they have, queens plus, and you're next to act with aces. Depending on the makeup of the table, you probably call and slow play more often because somebody behind you is going to do something, but the table conditions might not be, they might not be such that makes sense. You have to take into account a lot of different things because also something that could happen is they could raise, you could 3-bet, and somebody could cold 4-bet with queens that you get more value from then. The pre-flop adjustment that people love to make is to play more hands, and they love to justify it by, well, my opponent's folding too much or they're really bad post-flop. So, this really weak player opens and now I'm just going to call with a bunch of terrible hands. Those justifications, the logic is good, sort of, but you have to be very careful about how far you take the adjustment. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Bad hands in good situations, and by good situations, I mean you're up against a really weak player, you're up against somebody who's folding to 3-bets too often or folding their big blind too often, etc. Like when you have a good excuse to play a bad hand, those excuses work in scenarios where not many people are going to be entering the pot. So if a really terrible player opens with a normal range from middle position and it's folded to me in the big blind, if they're bad enough, I'll just play any hand, because they're just going to make such big mistakes that even 7-deuce offsuit is going to flop enough stuff enough of the time that to capitalize on their huge mistakes. But if they're terrible and they raise and 3 other people call, unless the way that they're terrible is that they just go all in blind on every flop, or something, like they just put in a ton of money, then sure, call and see if you flop trip 7s or 7, like 2 pair 7s and deuces, and then they're going to put their whole stack in. But most people, I mean, I haven't seen quite that that leak specifically in my career. But basically, anytime you want to take advantage of something and there's an opportunity for a lot of other people to enter the pot, temper your adjustments. And so, yeah, if the big blind folds too much, but there are 5 people between us and the big blind, we can't we can open maybe 1 or 2 hands that we couldn't otherwise, but you can't go much further than that because all these other people are going to play against you too. And if somebody who their leak is that, post flop, they're just super weak tight. If they miss the flop, they check fold. Well, now if they open in the cutoff and it's folded to me in the big blind, I can play most hands because I'm just going to steal the pot later. But if they open in early position and 2 other players call, I like being able to bluff one of the 3 of them out of the pot more easily is not really helping my weak hands. I just want to give you this general rule of, as you're making these pre-flop adjustments, don't overdo it in spots where more people can enter the pot than the one that you're targeting. Hopefully you found that helpful. And basically all of us take our pre-flop adjustments too far when we because we like to play more hands. It's more fun. So err on the side of not taking them too far. But if you want to take them too far, do it when it's a heads up pot. Good luck out there.